In Trevor Hart's book, Making Good, Creation, Creativity, and Artistry, put out by Biola University Press last year, he's got this great remark where he says that the heuristic and the creative belong together. And he's talking about how discovery and creating of things, they just go hand in hand. In fact, that it's often in the discovering that I find myself creating things, or it's in the creating that I find myself discovering things. So I'd love it if you two would talk from the visual arts perspective and from the literary arts perspective in response to this question. Do artists make new things? Do artists make new things?
Yes and no. And I think Hart is there's a lot of arguments in the book that are beautifully balanced, and I think that's one of them as well. I think, as a painter, when am I? Often I feel as though I'm uncovering or discovering something, digging something up that's already there or was there to be had. And often it's an image, a picture of something. And at the same time, it didn't exist before. It didn't in exactly the configuration that I've moved the pigments around in, or perhaps it's an art historical reference or something like this. And so I think that the answer is both. I mean, I'm working with the stuff of the world all the time. I don't make paintings out of nothing. I'm working with pre-existing materials and with a whole language that's been developed around painting. And yet, I feel a kind of urgency to push the thing forward, to make something new that even allows us to see the tradition in a meaningful way. And so, I would say probably a guarded yes.
Yeah. John, when you have made something new, so the yes side of the yes and no, what was it, or in what sense was it new? If you can think of even particular examples or the kind of experiences that involves.
Well, I made a painting recently based on two art historical works, their compositions. And so my real feeling was that I loved those works, and that what was kind of at the core of them was beautiful, something I needed to make a painting about. But then in order to make this painting, I did a number of drawing studies of, my children and my friends, and collected some experiences from my life that way, and then reconfigured them into this painting. And so those characters, those figures will never exist again for anyone else. There's a kind of newness to that, and the stuff's just taken from my life. And then, of course, I changed the composition. I sort of riffed on it to update it. And so there's that, again, that tension between my working within an already existing set of standing on what a painting is, all those kinds of things, and even within specific historical references, but then also feeling the urgency to renew them. I think I like the word renew, and also making new kind of together, because I think that also, again, helps us to continue to interpret and understand our own world and the past that's come to us that God has made and continues to make.
Yeah. It seems like I don't think I'd be content to relegate all of the newness to interpretive newness, but it does seem like so much of it is about seeing anew. We certainly can't make matter out of nothing. The way that's one of the things that only God can do.
Yeah, and Aristotle, and Hart mentions Aristotle in his book, distinguishes between a historian and a poet or artist, and he mentions that the historian transcribes reality as it is, whereas a poet / artist takes reality and represents what it may be, what it may become. And I think inherent in this book is that idea of transfiguring what is already there. So there's a givenness, but through language, through artistic expression, there's kind of a breaking up of reality, penetration into reality and transfiguring it. So I would say, yes, there is the givenness of the material, but there's a newness in the transfiguration of the given material into something new. And it's a wonderful idea that it's not just all of you creating something new, but there is a sense of humility in submitting to that, the given reality, but also the agency that you put in by transfiguring that reality into an artistic expression. So I think it does relate to the question of vision, that you see anew as a result of taking what's there and helping others and yourself see something new within that reality.
And I like the language of transfiguration. I think about Jesus as one who is identifiably still Jesus in a moment of transfiguration, the canonical moment, and yet who is, his figure has changed such that while he's recognizable, he's brand new. And he commands a sort of reverence. He invites a kind of awe. He leaves the disciples befuddled in that moment. They don't even know what to do, maybe partly because their categories have been so shifted, even though they know who they're looking at. You know? So there's this sense of fidelity in Transfiguration, fidelity to the original figure, but the trans of Transfiguration really holds. There's a newness, a shifting, a reconfiguration maybe.
Which is also, I mean, in that story, of course, a vision of a different kind of reality. It's not even that he's, something, as you're saying, something other, but I mean, this is truly just some glimpse of the glory of Christ that they're given. But and so when you think about works of art and what they do for us, sometimes things that even really shift, I mean, a category is blown apart. These actually can get us closer to the way the world actually is, right, at the same time, or help us to see its latent aspects and thus move it forward as we redeem it.
And there's something particular about the medium of art that enables one to see things new, in a sense that it elicits the response of the reader, the viewer, into seeing something new. And I'm thinking about the parables. It's told in a story. It's told in a kind of a figurative language. And by doing that, it invites the listener, the hearer, the audience to participate and see something new. If it was just given straightforwardly, I think there's less opportunities for that. And so the medium of art, I think, is particularly a good medium to elicit that kind of new vision because of by its very nature.
Yeah. It's interesting as you say that. A lot of what Hart wants to say is, let's talk about how art itself is a making something of the world. He returns to that phrase again and again. As you talk about parables, it occurs to me that art also makes something of its audience, of its hearers, that there's a way in which certain forms of, and maybe precisely more indirect forms of art, like a parable, works on its audience and is sort of very formative in a real strong sense, even as it requires an audience to come to completion. That's part of what Hart will talk about too, is the way that the viewer, the reader, the hearer of a work of art brings something, adds something.
It's another image of collaboration, in the sense that there's such a big element in the book, which I love, that as God has chosen to collaborate with us in the world. As an artist, I'm banking on collaboration, that actually more, as I create a thing, that the object itself, whatever I put out there, the experience is actually unfinished in a real sense too, getting back to our first conversation. And it's, I think all that other stuff that's made around it, it's interpretation, the criticism, conversations that might elicit, or just two people standing in front of it talking about that's all the new making as well, which, and you hope that just keeps going and opening up. And I think the parables often are an interesting example, because they're intentionally difficult, right, to understand. Like, I'm not going to say anything more plainly to you anymore. I'm going to hide it in the parable, so it's harder to understand. And actually those things that sometimes seem inscrutable, like the created world, but like a work of art, can actually offer more future newness in the conversations that they elicit, the works of art that will come after them, that are based on them. There's a richness to be mined, which is only, of course, a hint of the richness in the world that is there to be mined for us.
Yeah, and along with what both of you are saying, I think along with the new vision, there is also a new ethical orientation that emerges. So it's not just seeing things new in this kind of a new transfigured reality, but because of that, there is a response, and that response is involving the choices that you make, the decisions that you make, and there's kind of the aesthetics and the ethics converge, I think, beautifully through the medium of art.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's, even in the midst of Hart's celebration of the artist and sense of rich vision of the freedom and even the power of the artist, there's always this acknowledgement of the naturally embedded character of artistry. And therefore, I mean, the upside is, wow, art is a big deal. The downside is, art's a big deal. And so there's a call, but I think even this is a liberating call to faithfulness. Faithfulness to the world that God has made and our own making of the world. Faithfulness to evoke and articulate and expand that for the sake of the world.
Yeah, and I love the idea that that Hart brings in the chapter on language, that God inhabits the symbolic order, that God inhabits the order of signs, and that's part of the incarnation. But at the same time, that he leaves the space. We talked about kenosis. He leaves the space for his creation, his creatures, to participate in understanding that symbolic order and transfiguring reality. And so but it's not just the symbolic order. It's the immanence and the transcendent, because God is the one who underwrites language, but he doesn't give a definitive meaning. That there is openness for us to participate and create meaning with him. So I really love that idea.
And his second volume of the Poetics of Redemption will be on, or looking at, creativity through the lens of the incarnation. I hear he's already done quite a bit of work on it, and we eagerly await it.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.